Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. Tonight, we have my co host, Crystal. We also have a guest tonight, Lauren Silverstone from Maryland Inclusive Housing. We are excited to hear about affordable housing for our special needs community. So, with that being said, I'll have Lauren to take over and tell us a little bit about yourself, Lauren, and then tell us a little bit about Maryland Inclusive Housing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Lauren. I grew up here in Maryland, been here my entire life. Grew up in the Silver Spring area. I was a psychology major in college and in grad school, so that got me interested in working in the social services field. My first position in this field was actually at a women's shelter. So that's what sparked my curiosity in the housing world, seeing how very unfortunate situations that were well beyond people's control got them in these very dire housing needs. So I've been in this field a bit over 12 years. I have a huge passion for it. And other than my career, my other passions are animals and coffee. So I just want to share a little of that. So professionally, additionally, I work with Maryland Inclusive Housing. I've been here over 4 years. MIH celebrated our 5th anniversary in January. We are a nonprofit agency based in Silver Spring. However, we support individuals statewide. We primarily serve adults enrolled in waiver programs through the DDA, the Developmental Disability Administration. So individuals with disabilities may be eligible for waiver services. With the waiver service, each person has a designated case manager or service coordinator who can help them navigate various services based on that person's needs. So some individuals to live safely in the community may need supports with their activities of daily living. Or some folks want to develop their job skills and get a job. Other folks want to go to a day program. So where we come in is we help facilitate the housing piece and work as part of the team to help support that person to have safe housing in the community. So what we do is we are not a group home. We do not own any housing. We do not manage any housing programs. So that way people have a full choice of where they live and also what service providers come into their home. So typically what is most affordable for individuals is to get a voucher. And I can get into some particular voucher and rental assistance programs. So with a voucher, a person or household can pay 30% of the household income towards rent. So many of the folks we support, their primary source of income is Social Security income or Social Security disability income. The average SSI right now is $967 a month. That is impossible to afford, not even just rent, but food, medicine, toilet paper, all these essential items. So if they had a voucher, just for example, if their SSI benefits were $1,000 per month, 30% of that is $300. That is the most that person would pay for rent with the voucher. It goes directly to the landlord, and the housing authority pays the rest of the rent directly to the landlord. So with those kind of programs, we also work with the individual long term. So once they get into housing, that's not the end of the story. We want to help support that person to keep their housing long term. So at a minimum, we do monthly check-ins with the folks we support, particularly at the beginning of the month, because we want to ensure that there are no issues with getting rent and utility paid on time. We help them walk them through that. We ensure there aren't any outstanding maintenance issues that need to be addressed. And then additionally, sometimes there's just communication issues or behavioral issues that we need to help be a support for that person. So just for example, due to a person's disability, they may make some noise and be a little bit louder than some of their neighbors. And there are sometimes complaints that go to landlords. concerns. In those cases, we've been able to be advocates for the person and gotten lease violations for noises that were caused due to a disability off their record. Um, Additionally, if folks need reasonable accommodation requests to help make their home more accessible or to help even get into housing in the first place, we can help with that. So, a reasonable accommodation may be for an accessibility need, such as grab bars in the shower, just so they don't slip, they're safer. Individuals who utilize wheelchairs for mobility, they may need more space in their apartment or maybe need carpet removed. So encounters may be lowered. But some of the other things we can do to even get folks into housing are doing reasonable accommodation requests for their applications. Some of the big barriers, just offhand, are credit history, that folks may not have had the opportunity to even build credit because they've maybe been living with family members or they were maybe in a group home, institutionalized setting beforehand. So we can help do a reasonable accommodation request to ask to not make that as a criteria for their application. So just going to pause for a moment to see if there's any questions on the call.
Well, I do have a question. I know
Sure.
that a lot of the times with, and we've had some of our, we've had guests on here that needed housing through, like the Maryland area, and it seems like it was so many barriers up. How is your program different from a state program? Is that something? Do you have? I think with your program, you say that you have to have a DDA. Is that the only criteria that separates you all from like a state program?
Yeah, so we are specifically providers under the DDA, the developmental disability. So we do get paid through Maryland Medicaid to provide these services. And we can provide general information and support to individuals, even if they're not in DDA waivers. We just wouldn't be able to provide the long term case management services. But what kind of differentiates us is that we will help individuals explore every single program they're eligible for. There are rental assistance programs that are very specific to folks with disabilities. So if they don't have a disability, they can't even apply to get on that wait list.
Okay, so as I was listening, I started taking notes. And so, what if someone has housing, but now they're in a situation that they can't afford it. They're always behind in the rent. Um, is they do receive SSI, and it's not enough to help them even catch up, even on a payment plan. Like, is your organization still able to help with that, or to help them navigate through that, or to help them maybe find something more reasonable and accommodating to them?
Yes. So if folks are in a housing situation that's unaffordable, we would work with them to see if they are eligible based on their income and other factors for a voucher. The tricky part is that depending on the county, some of those county-based wait lists are closed. So you may have heard of Section 8, which is now the Housing Choice Voucher. The wait list is open in Montgomery County, but it's closed in Howard County, Prince George's County, Harford County, and I think Charles. So there's various counties where folks can't even get on those voucher wait lists. So in that case, we would work with them to look at other more affordable properties. What I also recommend are low income housing tax credit properties. So with those, that is a federal program. So that is available all throughout America. And there's actually a nice little database where you can plug in your county and it shows you all the properties. But in that, what you would do is apply directly to that property. So it's not quite as, say, a long wait list as a voucher. However, it's not quite as subsidized. It's more that folks pay either 30, 40 to 60% of the standard market rent rate. So it's more you pay on a tier. And what makes that possible is that the developers get tax credits in order to keep some of the units more affordable. So that would kind of be an alternative, kind of depending on the location where that individual resides.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I do have another. Someone sent me a question. They're watching on YouTube, but they couldn't send it in. But one of the questions that I was asked was, is this a program specifically for people with physical disabilities? But I think you kind of already answered that because it just, from my understanding, Madeline, I know you're listening, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, as
Mhm.
long as you meet the DDA requirements, whether it's a physical disability, a cognitive disability, or mental disability, as long as you meet the criteria for DDA, DDA is the umbrella and everything comes up under it. Is that kind of like you all are like a vendor or a nonprofit that works directly with DDA to locate housing for anybody that meets the criteria for those services?
Exactly. So we
Okay.
are one vendor. There are definitely other providers that do what we do that are certified in housing support services. So we are just one provider that helps people navigate this process. So typically, in order to qualify for DDA services, a person would need an intellectual and developmental disability. So
Okay.
folks may also have, a physical disability. And certain programs are available, depending on their situation. So I can kind of explain some of the more specific programs for people with disabilities.
I'm glad you said that because I did not know that DDA does not, you can't be approved under DDA for physical, just like a straight physical disability. It has to be cognitive or intellectual. I didn't know that. Wow, that's okay.
An alternative program I would suggest, though, is the Community First Choice Program. That is a Medicaid entitlement program, and that program does support folks. Just it's a little more broad for disability, so that could be, behavioral health, that possibly, depending if they meet kind of the level of care, but that's also primarily more physical health.
Do you know if they still have that subsidy, like the 30%? Does it still function the same or is it different?
So for the Community First Choice program, they just provide, say, the wraparound supports like the case manager and the other supports. They don't specifically have a rental assistance program.
Okay.
However, their case manager may be able to help them navigate those wait lists. Because, for example, just the Section 8 housing, which is now the Housing Choice voucher, that's just open based on the person's income. So you don't necessarily need any waiver or disability to get in that particular program.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Absolutely. And then, like I was saying, there are a few programs that are specifically for individuals with disabilities. But before I get into that, maybe I'll talk about the two types of vouchers. So there are two types. So with this, there's a project based. So if you hear the word project, that means it's a specific property that you would pay that 30% of your income towards rent at. However, if you leave that property, you can't take it with you. So it's just specifically connected to that project. However, what's a little more flexible is a tenant-based voucher. Because with that, that is connected to the tenant. So an example of that would be the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher. With that, a person has a little more freedom to select what building they want. And thankfully, in the state of Maryland, there is a source of income discrimination law. So any standard apartment complex, if they have 4 or more units, and if they're not a private landlord, they legally have to accept a voucher. So it does give you that flexibility. The property would also have to meet the payment standards or maximum rental amount. So there are a few other factors. You can't go get a $5,000 a month penthouse for a 1-bedroom person, but you can get something reasonable within the voucher parameters. And the other piece of that is if a person has a disability, one of the reasonable accommodation requests we do is for a second bedroom. So typically, if you're issued a voucher, if it's just a one single adult, you're going to get a one bedroom voucher. That's what makes sense. However, for a person with a disability, they may have a lot of medical equipment. Hoyer lifts are huge. They may have extra wheelchairs. So we can get a second bedroom without any additional fees if the person has a lot of medical equipment, or if the person needs a live-in care provider, and they have a person identified. If it's a parent who's not, say, a legal guardian, then they could possibly even be that live-in aid. But with that, they essentially get a second bedroom unit, but the rent is still only based on that primary individual's income.
So when you say that it's based off of the primary person's income, then does that mean too that the second person has to pay something as well? Like if that's
So
a guardian or a family member?
So that is kind of up to the arrangement of those two individuals. Typically, if there's the caregiver, they're kind of getting free room and board most of the time. And then oftentimes, if they are the provider through the waiver, they can also get paid for the caregiver hours. Probably not
Mm,
24 hours. It's unless that's well documented, it's very challenging to get 24-hour supports. However, that tends to work out that they get paid to provide services, they get free room and board, but oftentimes they make agreement about, say, utilities and groceries, those kind of things.
okay. Now, the severity of a person's disabilities, say, my daughter is nonverbal. My daughter, she has cognitive disabilities, intellectual disabilities. So she has multiple disabilities. Do you all have housing for individuals to live on their own like that? Or do they have to have, naturally, they're going to have someone to stay with them. Do you have a scenario that mirrors that when you're trying to find housing?
Yeah, so in that instance, we do find that having a live in provider or living aid is very beneficial, especially if that's a person who would, say, be vulnerable at night alone.
Mhm, mhm,
However, even if they don't have a live-in provider, through the DDA, they can cover overnight support services, and some
mhm.
people are funded for 24-hour supports. So
Okay.
there are nursing assessments. So every approval is really catered to that person's needs. And yes, we do work with people who 24 hours a day do have supports and live well in the community.
Okay, because I
I
always
like
hear
that you
about
brought that
groceries.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that you brought that up, Paula, because it just makes it seem like you never know a situation, especially like the way the economy is going, and if you are caring for a person that have a lot of those high needs, and they actually need a place to stay, become homeless or something, that there are supports within the
Mhm,
in the community that will still assist them, and the caregiver as well. The caregiver can come along and continue to care for the individual. So I really
mhm,
like that you shared that, because that, I'm pretty sure some people do not know that.
mm-mm. Because all we hear about is group homes. I know for me,
Yeah.
I've always heard about group homes. And when I hear about people living on their own, not saying my daughter will ever live on her own, but the thing about it is we always hear about people that are more than capable of taking care of themselves. You rarely hear it where the person has multiple disabilities and they even have that option to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had quite a few people live successfully in the community with the right supports. And sometimes it does, take some time to find just the right caregivers and the right people for their needs. But when we get the right team in place, it can work out really well.
I like that. I like that. What about roommate scenarios? Now I've heard some special needs individuals, they have roommates and then they have someone to manage the house that comes in and checks on everybody, make sure they give them their medication. Is that something you guys also get involved in?
We do. And actually, for folks who are interested in roommates, we've actually been able to match some of the folks that we work with. We actually have a group of three young women who are renting an apartment together, and it's been going quite well.
That's awesome. I
Oh,
like
that's
that.
beautiful. Yeah.
I
And it
like
also
that.
And the other piece of that is none of the young women had a voucher yet, but it made it more affordable since they were able to split the rent three ways. And I think I had briefly mentioned low income housing tax credit properties. So, what are very similar are that in certain jurisdictions, they have inclusionary housing. So, it's very similar. It's that they keep some properties, a few units at some properties more affordable. So, in Montgomery County, there's moderately priced dwelling units. So they have those to rent and they also have them to buy. And then in Howard County, which is actually where the young ladies live, they're in an MIHU, which is a moderate income housing unit. So we were able to find a lower priced unit. And then with the three young ladies, combining their income, they were able to afford it and qualify.
I like that. Wow. So
And
I heard you mention the option to buy.
then,
How does that work?
So, actually, one of my colleagues on our team is a licensed realtor. So, we do have a few folks who are interested in buying. And in fact, there is a home purchasing program available. It's called Home Ability. It's through the Maryland Mortgage Program. And actually, July 1st is the kind of the start of it because that aligns with the new fiscal year. So, throwing that out there, if anyone's interested, go look into it. So, what they do is they provide down payment and closing cost assistance for individuals who have a disability, or you can be the guardian for the person or otherwise reside with them. So it's a little flexible. And to start that process, on the website that talks about the program, there's a list of lenders that are approved to work through it. So an individual will reach out to the lender, make sure they meet the minimum credit score, which I think is 640 is the minimum credit. And if they can qualify, then they may be eligible to get, again, that down payment and or closing cost assistance to help purchase a home.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
wow.
I've
Yes.
never
Now,
heard of
does
that.
I know. Now, does this affect their them receiving like Medicaid, their SSI? Does that them being able to be in a position to purchase a place to live? Does that affect that?
So very good question. A house is not considered an asset in terms of that it would, impact SSI. However, the tricky part is that we know that people cannot have more than $2,000 in their account at a time. So that's kind of the piece. However, what often happens is that parents may put the funds elsewhere, this is legal. There are what are called special needs trusts. So some parents may put funds into the trust, which would then purchase the home, or they sometimes even put the home in the trust just to secure it for when they pass. And then the other option is an ABLE account.
I was
So with
about to say that.
oh yeah, with an ABLE
That
account,
famous
yep.
able account.
Yep, and they are fabulous. I would definitely recommend that. That is a way that individuals, families, loved ones can contribute to the person without impacting their SSI benefits. And as long as that person takes out funds, that month and they spend it that month, it's fine. That won't impact their SSI. So because just to watch out for those, income level issues, those are typically how people navigate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
awesome because I've never heard of a special needs individual even given the option to purchase a home. You always hear, again, I hear about the group homes, I hear about subsidized housing, different things, but you rarely hear about them given the option to buy a house. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, so we work with a few people who own condos, they own homes. And the nice piece of that is that through the DDA waiver, you can get up to 50, it's a good number, $1,000. It's every 3 years for modifications. So if you get a home that, say, maybe needs a ramp or a stair glide or other features, DDA will come and improve your home to improve your accessibility.
Wow. I hope all of our listeners are listening at these, this is turning over a rock and finding information that we've never heard before. This is awesome.
And I
This
have
is
we have
awesome.
oh, I was going to say we have a lot of this information on our website, mih-inc.org. So you folks are welcome to visit our website. It is very lengthy, so I think pretty much everything I'm saying is on our website as well, which also has my contact information. Oh, sorry, if folks have questions, they're welcome to reach out to me.
So walk us through the process of initiating getting housing. Okay, at this point, we've of course been approved for DDA. You're 21 years old. Kind of take us through the process of going and obtaining housing.
Sure. So once someone gets into DDA, I'll just take you to our referral process. And they're working with their CCS, their service coordinator, and their conversation identifies that that person's ready to live independently. Their service coordinator will refer them to a housing support services provider, say MIH, and will work to get us added to their person-centered plan. Once DDA approves that, we meet with that person. We do a housing needs assessment. So
Mhm.
we identify what is their income. Do they have any accessibility needs? Do they need to be, say, near public transportation? Really identify what that person needs. And then, kind of based on that, we can then look at what are the housing programs available in the area they want to live in. Because again, some programs are very specific to counties and other things. So if we'll identify that, then we'll start working, immediate apply to the wait lists. We tried to build a very strong case for why that person needs rental assistance. There are very lengthy wait lists. And most programs do prioritize people who are homeless or either at risk of homelessness. So if someone is in a crisis, we definitely, detail that at great length. So then once someone is issued a voucher, we work with them to identify a unit that meets the voucher standards, but also meets their needs. That's compatible with that. We can help them set up tours. Once they find a place they like, we can assist with the application process. If there are any issues with the application getting approved, because on occasion there's credit history barriers or criminal history barriers, we can help with the reasonable accommodation request to navigate that. Once they get approved, help them review their lease so they know what they're signing. That gets signed. Help them set up utilities, renter's insurance, make sure everything's set up. For many people, if they're comfortable with it, we do recommend setting their payments on auto approve or direct deposit, so that immediately goes in and we can help them set that up. And then once they're into their housing, then we check in with them, like I said, a minimum of at least once a month. That way we're just making sure that rent and utilities are paid, there's no maintenance issues or any other concerns. Additionally, we try to establish relationships with the landlords and property managers. So that way, if there is an issue or concern, they'll come to us instead of just going to say, oh, you're making noise, let me give you a lease violation. They could at least reach out to us, let us know there's an ongoing concern, and then we can work with that person and their team to get what they need to help improve the behavior. For example, sometimes we just put in some soundproofing features. That helps. Or we get people behavioral health services. So whatever we can do to help keep that person in their house, we'll do that long term.
Okay.
I appreciate that your organization continues to keep up and check in and make sure, because just getting people to that destination, that's always just not um, the end of it. Just also just needing help navigating a little bit further, like you said, resolving any issues or conflicts, just coming in and helping them advocate maybe with the tenant. Or I think that is wonderful. I think that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Thank you. And we also try to do ongoing tenancy training So once folks, get their lease, we review their lease with them. We want them to know their rights as a tenant, but also their responsibilities. They know where their
Yeah.
trash is. But they know where their emergency exit is. They know what the visitor policy is. So we try to set people up to be good tenants. And sometimes it's a work in progress. None of us are perfect, but we do find it helpful to provide the ongoing support to keep people in their homes. And some people are great. I have many individuals. I don't even ask if they paid rent at the beginning of the month. They just text or email me their money order because they are just like, "Yep, it's done. We're good." And that's what we want. We want to get people to that point where they feel
Yes.
comfortable paying their rent and utilities, and all they just need to do is just, confirm I'm good to go. I'll let you know if I have a problem.
And
Yeah.
that sense of
Very good.
independence is great because, as we know, we want to make them as independent as possible. And then we want them to be an effective or a definite part of the community. And I'm thinking of the word, but we definitely want them to feel a part of the community. It's a sense of accomplishment when they get in.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a great thing because most of them, most individuals want a chance to be independent, to have their own place, to live on their own, to do, even if they can cook or whatever. It's just such a sense of accomplishment. And I'm so glad that, that's something that they're given the opportunity to do.
Absolutely. And with advances in technology, there's even been more ways to support people.
Mhm.
So one of the newer forms of technology is remote support, which is available
Mm.
through the DDA. So through that, they give individuals, they'll get, say, a smartphone or a tablet. And through that, they can contact their remote support provider 24 hours a day. If they have a
Mm.
problem,
Wow.
they get locked out of their apartment, or sometimes they need help with just skills like, I'm cooking a new recipe, can you make sure I'm not burning this.
Hmm.
So that has been really great for some of our individuals to help build their independence. They're like, well, I don't want to call my mom about this again, but I can call my remote support provider. So there's just been more ways to help support people and make them feel connected, which has been great.
Now, how far in advance should they start this process? Because is it likely that when they turn 21, that they start it then? Because it seems like it's a little lengthy. Should they start it a little early?
The sooner the better.
Okay.
And especially, nothing's set in stone, but there are a lot of proposed changes to the voucher program going forward.
Okay.
Right
Hmm.
now, the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 is federally funded. So that's through HUD,
Mm.
Housing Urban Development. So there
Mm.
have been White House proposals to eliminate the federal funding component, and that each state would just get a community block grant, and each state would then manage these vouchers.
Mhm.
So that wouldn't necessarily mean they're being eliminated, but there would be changes in how they're administered. And then the second piece of that, which is more likely to go through, is that they are now saying anyone who's quote unquote able bodied, which is pretty broad description if you ask me, anyone who's able bodied can only have a voucher for 2 years. However, individuals who are seniors or have a disability can maintain their voucher. But again, that's going to be, it's a very broad definition of what people
Right.
are able bodied. And there are going to be so many people who fall through the cracks under that definition.
Yeah. What about rental insurance? Is that something that, I know most people, I think rental insurance is a mandatory thing these days. How does that work?
Yeah, we help people connect to renters insurance. I will say the cheapest one I've found is about $10 a month. So I typically connect folks to that one, but we will usually help get them several quotes so that person can choose which security deposit, or sorry, renters insurance option they find to be
Okay.
best. But it is very important to have. It protects them, if there's a flood
Right.
or other disaster. So it's very important. That's one of the first things we help people set up once they get their
Yeah.
lease signed.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Now, when someone reaches out to Maryland Inclusive Housing and they share their interests and you get the application started, the process, how long does that usually take? What is that time frame?
So each situation is a little bit unique. It
Mm-hmm.
really depends on a couple factors. What county do they want to live in? Because if they're in one of the
Okay.
counties with, say, a closed voucher wait list, that makes it a little tougher. If they're, say, living with a parent and there's no immediate crisis, they might be on a wait list maybe for a few years just because there's no
Wow.
urgent need. However, if a person is homeless, at risk of homelessness, they're always going to be the top priority for pretty much any voucher program.
Mhm.
And then kind of after that, they really look at people who are institutionalized or in, say, a group home setting. And then kind of after that, they're kind of looking at, okay, this person has a lower income, but they seem kind of relatively stable in their housing.
Okay. That
Um,
helps.
Yeah. And one of the programs that I do recommend for individuals, specifically if they are enrolled in a DDA waiver, is that there is a rent subsidy program only for people enrolled in DDA.
Mm.
So the DDA rent subsidy program, it's fairly new. Only 18 individuals have leased up successfully through the program.
Oh.
But this is available statewide, and it is a tenant-based voucher, so not connected to any particular building. So we've had several people lease up through this program, and it's been going great. We just had someone renew her lease a little over a year, so she's successfully been in her home.
Okay.
Hmm.
So
And
it's
you said the tenant base, I'm sorry, the tenant base is you could take that anywhere.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, and just one of the things I meant to add on that. So that one is specific to Maryland, so you can't take it out of Maryland, the DDA rent subsidy.
Mhm.
However, with, say, the housing choice voucher, again, that's federally funded, so you could take it to Hawaii technically if you found like a place that works for you there.
Wow.
But no, you can take it anywhere in the U.S. It's so that's the little bit more flexibility there. But particularly in areas like Howard, Prince George's, Haverford, where those wait lists are closed, it's good that there's the DDA rent subsidy, which is available in that area.
Okay.
How does that, do you all have a voucher for furniture for them? Or how does that work?
So vouchers typically only cover rent. However, there are several resources we connect people to. In Silver Spring, there's an organization where you can get on a list to get free furniture. Usually they give you like a shopping window, you get an appointment and you can go pick up household items. There's some other furniture banks that we can refer people to. Um, and since the voucher does only cover rent, we also try to connect people to the Maryland Energy Assistance Program if they do have to pay for gas and electric bills.
Okay.
So with that, they provide a stipend directly to the utility company. So that way it does not impact a person's SSI benefits because that's not a check they're getting directly.
Okay.
Okay.
And you can apply for that every year. Actually, the renewal period for that is 7/1 as well. So if anyone is interested, look up the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, or OHEP. It's Office of Home Energy Programs, and that's a Maryland statewide program as well.
Also, when we first started out, you mentioned that you guys had a certain amount of houses and you were looking to expand. What are those houses specifically for? Is that to house people there? Is that different from the apartments or what have you?
Oh, well, we don't say directly own any houses.
Oh,
So
maybe I
so our
misunderstood. It
oh
was
no worries.
something you said it was something with housing, and you said that we only had a couple, but we're expanding.
Oh, I may have said housing committees. We have housing committees throughout the state. So maybe that's what I was saying.
Okay, housing committees. Okay, okay.
So we currently have six. So we have Montgomery, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, Eastern Shore. I think I caught all of them. So with those, what we do is we meet every 2 months with various stakeholders, such as housing authorities, centers for independent living. So we try to identify the specific housing needs in those communities because every place is different. Like the Eastern
Mhm.
Shore is vastly different than, say, the Baltimore area.
Mhm.
It's much more rural. There's not a lot of public transportation. So finding housing near public transportation is much tougher down in the shore. So that's just one example. So then we kind of try to work together and come up with strategies to try to, address some of these ongoing issues in these counties.
Okay. Wow. This is awesome information.
Great.
Oh my goodness. This I've never heard of this. I mean, and when I say that, again, most of our special needs individuals, I think most people, even for my daughter, people just say, well, what is she gonna do? I mean, first of all, they think she stays at home all day. And then they say, well, she goes to school. I'm like, yeah, she goes to school. But most of them must say, well, what's going to happen when she graduates? And I think a lot of people do not realize that that's an option that they have. And most people don't know about it. And so they don't know how to exercise their rights to even respond to that. So this is good information for anyone who is looking. Again, I do remember DDA, like they didn't have to wait until they were 21. Like you said, even if you are on the brink of being homeless, that's somebody that rises to the top of the list. Now, it was another category too for someone. It was the people that were like stood to be homeless, and then it was other people. Can you kind of give us the rank? Because I think the people, even though you've been approved for DDA, they were like, it's the homeless, and then it was something else that came before anyone else.
Yeah, I believe that may have been risk of institutionalization.
Okay, maybe. Okay.
So yeah, sometimes what happens is folks are approved for DDA and then they may be waitlisted just due to funding
Mhm.
issues. And then they are put into different priority categories for that. So I know there's a crisis intervention, prevention. So if you are in a crisis, you are more likely to get services quicker.
Okay. Now I know DDA budget has been cut. Have you all seen any cuts with people's housing?
So we will say we didn't see any additional funds allocated for the DDA rent subsidy program. There weren't any funds taken away, but we were hopeful that was going to be additional funding added to the budget.
Okay.
And we just haven't really seen a lot of voucher funding being added in general, just kind of overall.
Okay. Okay, someone asked the question. People are texting me questions because some people are watching it on YouTube. It says, can you ask what if the clients have uninvited family or guests move in? Do they use the eviction process through the courts?
So they probably couldn't go through an actual eviction unless there was a lease in place.
Okay.
So typically to go for an eviction, there needs to be a lease. The lease would have to be violated and that would have to go through the court. And then if deemed, appropriate, then yes, they would need to be evicted. Um, Otherwise, we would just try to work with that person to try to get that person, their family member removed, with it, whatever way they needed. If we need to, connect them with non-emergency police services or whatever, to resolve that issue.
Yeah. Because it seems like if the person has a guardian or someone living there, they need to be on the lease.
Right.
Okay. 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 Now, what if I know these things can happen? What if you have somebody that falls behind in their rent? How does that work? How do you guys step in and try to help with that?
So with that, we would connect them with community resources. There are quite a few social services departments that do have emergency funds available. Additionally, we have quite a few faith organizations that we've built partnerships with that we can refer people to, and they'll be able to assist with certain things.
Okay. And would that also affect the person's like the status? Because ultimately, if you have someone that's staying there and they are not able to pay the rent or their guardian is somewhat unstable, what what does the committee, the housing committee, do to ensure it doesn't happen again? Because ultimately, these people, like you say, they need to have stable residence.
Right. So we try to work with each person and we develop kind of a person centered housing plan, which gets updated pretty regularly. So we just try to put things in place to help make that person more successful. If that person kind of needs help with budgeting, we can help with that. We also refer people to free credit counseling resources. So we've been able to kind of get credit issues resolved, medical bills kind of resolved, back rent, negotiated. So just kind of depends on that person's situation.
This is really awesome. I do appreciate this because when you think of the scenarios, and I've heard of people in different states, probably the DMV, like DC area, and I've heard of people that were somewhat being taken advantage of. So I'm glad that person asked that question because sometimes they had a family member living there, and it wasn't the best conditions. Say that the person was on drugs, they weren't on the lease, and different things like that. And as you say, it's like a place where somebody can stay free. They can truly take advantage of this person, and then that person being put into an unsafe environment. You don't want to go from like from your parents' house to now being able to be independent, but at the same time you're in an unsafe situation.
Right.
So that definitely is something that, I can't imagine somebody being in a situation like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're just, like I said, one part of the team because they also often have another case manager. They may have personal support. So we all kind of work together to kind of figure out what is the root of the issue. Is this a family issue? Is this an issue where maybe the person needs some more support services? Do they need resources? So it is helpful to have that team approach so we can really identify the core root of the issue.
Okay. Okay.
That's helpful to know. What I'm learning also is um, with my children, making sure they get the resources that the state offers, also looking towards our communities, just being aware of different organizations and what they have to offer as well. Sometimes I think it gets a little lost in the sauce. We don't always, it's not always as forthcoming to learn what organizations have to offer. Like we're sitting here and we're like, wow, like this is very interesting to know. And I know, Lauren, you're probably like, we've been here, but it's just sometimes the accessibility, like how do we get informed? And I was just like talking to a provider for employment that they receive through state agencies. They were helping my one of my children, and I asked that question, and he did advise that it can be overwhelming. He knows, but even though he's aware of information, he can't always be forthcoming with all the information he has about other things that are out there. And I told him I appreciate him saying that, and I appreciate him not always just sharing everything, because then he will now be a point of contact for stuff he has nothing to do with. He's not a part of those organizations. He cannot answer those questions. But because he gave me a small bit of information, he's going to always be my point of contact. I mean, I wouldn't do that, but I understood that. And so he said, because that was the question, like, how do we know about this? This isn't out there. And so I think that Paula, you met her at Lauren at an expo.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like, as parents, caregivers, just getting out there, expanding our horizons to get to know other agencies, and just the mere fact that you said there are other agencies, and you threw out a couple of them. I wrote them down, even though I'm not in the state of Maryland. All of my family is in Maryland. And so I just wrote them down that they can further look into it. Sometimes we just need a little crumb, to get started. And so when I learned that you were coming on from Maryland Inclusive Housing, I immediately went to your website. I was like, oh, I know people who can benefit from this information. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to come and just share information with us, with our community. Even if you're not in the state of Maryland, you should know that go out and look at the resources in your area,
Mhm.
ask questions, and start with your caseworker. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with my caseworker and just ask them. My caseworker is usually really good about this is out there, that, and the other. And so, but it's just just inquire about it. And so I really appreciate you doing this tonight.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. And you had mentioned, the expo that I was going to suggest any community events that are, especially a lot of them are free. I think the one I did was
Yeah.
like a $3 admission fee. But in any case, yeah, community events are a great place to just, meet great people and find out what's going on in the community and who you can connect with.
That's how I met you, for
Exactly.
sure. I mean, we circled around and we were looking, and when I saw the housing again, for me, that's not even something that I don't think anybody ever offered me or told me anything about Morgan having access to housing. I never even thought about. And again, I'm gonna be honest, most likely she will never leave my house. But it's still good to have that option because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's still good to have that option. And I know, Crystal, we talk about, Jael, moving on. And I think just knowing your kids, sometimes we'll be surprised. And some people told me that. They say you may be surprised that she may come one day and say she wants to move. I said, yeah, I don't think so.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But I mean, the thing about it is, I think for most people, when they think about their special needs individual leaving the house, and I would be honest, you think about a safety. You think about safety. You think about them being on their own because even my son, who's 25, he doesn't live with me, and I'm nervous with him. So I think about with the special needs individual, you think about from a safety standpoint, you think about them being able to manage a household, and it is good to a certain extent that they can it just grow and learn, but it's just as a parent, this is not something that most people want to think about when it comes to their special need individual. It's just
And I think it's on an individual basis.
I agree.
You assess the needs of the individual. Some are able to, even with like intellectual and cognitive disabilities, they still are able to manage and function and live a well-being life. And so she mentioned my daughter, Lauren, and this is something that we talk about, is that my
Mhm.
daughter is 25. She has expressed she does have an intellectual disability, and she has expressed of like living on her own and in our state. And so I want her to know, I feel like I've raised her. I feel like I've surrounded her with a good community. She know who she can trust. She know who's to go to and ask for help. But I do understand what you're saying, Paula. Like sometimes an individual living on their own, they may you feel also like it's not me there, and
Mhm.
is that person taking really good care of my loved one, and are they being taken advantage of, are they being abused? Those things definitely go through our heads.
Yeah.
And I think that's all the love and care that we have. But there are some individuals who do not have that support, they do not have that love and care, and they have to manage life on their own. And these are really great supports that are put in place. Like that's one thing Lauren discussed that I liked. It wasn't just getting them into housing and like
Mhm.
that was the end all. Like, we got you there, here you go, you're
Yeah.
all set. It was like, it's such good follow through, such good ways of helping them sustain housing, living on their own, and finding stability and something to call their own. And I think that's stuff that things like that increases your confidence and your ability to continue moving on. And that's what I really, really, that was a really big takeaway for me, Lauren, is knowing that, is your rent paid, or did you do this? Did you that? Oh, if someone said I received a noise complaint and I don't think I'm making noise, maybe someone come and assess, because you might not think you're making noise, but maybe your equipment, it makes some noise or something, and then they're like, well, we're going to assist in how to help this. So it does, like, that is huge. That
Yeah.
is major, and I know that there would be many families hearing this type of information would appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a little, I like I say, I just think about Morgan and I will, I don't know, like I say, I think it's a great thing because some people have said that they never thought their kids could live on their own. And when they did, it was eye opening. And then I guess too, when you think about it, from the flip side, as the guardian, it kind of gives you that sense of relief, a sense of peace when you see them making it. And I guess just like with anybody else, they can make a mistake. That's life. But you just,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just something that, like I say, I think just giving them the option to be on their own and, is definitely a sense of accomplishment.
And I think there's a balance between, dignity of risk and then caring for people. We want to support people, but we
Yes.
also want to make sure they're being safe about it. So that's where the team approach
Yes.
comes in.
And I love that team approach. I love the fact that everybody works together. And I think even for my daughter at this point, the teacher works with the speech works with the occupational therapy, so it takes a team. I mean, it took a
Yes.
team, it took a village when it came to raising our special needs individuals, and at some point they have to go out into the community, even if they're not living out there, but just being able to exist. They have to go out into the community, and it does become a part of, it does become a point where we can't, baby them all the time. Of course, this will always be the safe haven. But again, it's like you'll be surprised. And once your kids get out and you're like, I didn't know they could do that because, of course, when they're not with us, they're totally different.
Right.
Yeah,
They
and I think
become totally independent.
what's most important is like them not only just feeling included in community, but feeling like they belong there,
Yeah.
and that is a huge takeaway for me when I look at my children is that I want them to feel like you belong here too.
Yeah.
I don't want us to just use inclusiveness, just throw it out there, but that they feel like, so I think that this is very important, very important. So I really appreciate what Maryland Inclusive Housing is doing, their mission, how they're helping individuals. I really commend you. And I thank you, Lauren. I thank you for your time tonight. And I thank you for what you're doing, helping people achieve their goals.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me talk about our organization. And of course, if
Mhm.
there's any, questions that folks, if they reach out to you with any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'm happy to
You
assist.
know, Lauren,
Absolutely.
can you please type your email address? I mean,
Yeah.
your the website that they can go to if they have any questions regarding housing.
Yeah.
Because yes, some people are watching and they were asking, like I said, they sent me questions, but I think it would be really good for people to be able to go directly to the website, read up, and then be able to reach out with any questions.
Perfect. I think I put it in the chat, so hopefully folks saw that. That might be the private chat.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I think it is the private chat. Let me see.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like I have to connect to YouTube to do that.
Okay, let me see. Let me see. I could possibly put it in the chat too.
Perfect. So good old copy and paste. There you go.
Okay, there we
That's
go.
what I did. I did copy and
Oh,
Yeah,
paste.
fabulous.
it hit the
That's it.
YouTube. It went everywhere. So for
Fabulous.
those that have again the housing needs and just knowing that this could be a benefit to your special needs individuals, please reach out. Like Lauren said, this is one of many agencies, but this is kind of an overview where it applies because all of them go by the same guidelines. Correct, Lauren? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So definitely take advantage of, getting them as much as they need, the energy programs, all of the programs. Just take advantage of
Yes.
it because again, knowledge is power. And again, I didn't know we had this. So this is a great podcast for us to learn about affordable housing for our special needs individuals and all the parameters. So I do appreciate you, Lauren, for letting us, for taking time to be on here. And if you wanted to give any closeout remarks, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say apply early and apply to many wait lists if possible to expand your chances to get a voucher. Try not to get discouraged, but I do think that early planning is key, and get out there and see what's in your community and just see what works best for you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again for joining us. Thank you, Crystal. We pray that everyone has a wonderful weekend and they will come back and join us next Thursday for another episode of Advocacy. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, Crystal. Y'all have a
Have a
great
good
weekend.
night.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Bye.
Mhm. Bye bye.